going to talk about global warming. There's a belief that Donald Trump doesn't believe in global warming, that Republicans and conservatives don't believe in global warming, etc. The list goes on. And some people who have, and these are accusations are made by liberals and Democrats, and I've heard it by Seth Meyers. I've heard him say it. And there's some people who are better informed who say conservatives don't believe that humans are the number one cause of global warming. And I'm going to set you straight right now with facts and logic that human beings are not the number one cause of global warming, and human activity, regulating human activity, is not going to fix global warming. And I've known this for a long time, and the evidence is obvious. And okay, so I knew many years ago, perhaps in the 80s, I had read about global warming over the years, and one fact that I knew is that there were events that had a major impact on global warming, and that was the explosion of nuclear bombs in the atmosphere. There have been thousands of nuclear bomb tests. In fact, a few days ago, I saw a list somewhere that showed how many atmospheric tests have been done. I think the number was really high. And it was known during World War II that nuclear bombs would cause global warming because they had data at that time that showed that the explosion of nuclear bombs was impacting the temperature. But it wasn't having a permanent impact. It would have a short-term temporary impact, and then the temperature would go back down. If you look at man-made activities, it's very difficult to directly correlate anything that man does to global warming. You can't say, I drove this car, here's a spike in global warming. That type of data does not exist, but it kind of does exist for nuclear bomb testing, where they can look and say, we did a nuclear bomb test on this day, released an immense amount of heat, and we noticed a spike in temperatures, okay? Or maybe a volcanic eruption might do it also, but that's not a man-made activity. So we come to modern times, and 40 years have passed, 30 years have passed since I've researched this. There's a lot more data. And when you look at the data, there still is not evidence that mankind is the major impact on global warming, even when you include nuclear testing in the atmosphere. So France was the last country to do nuclear testing in the atmosphere. I believe it happened in the 1990s, even though it was banned a long time ago. They just refused to listen to the ban. And they did it one last time. They might have done 2 tests, and then they never did it again. It was banned, and the testing moved underground, or they do computer models. So nuclear weapons were causing problems. If they continued to do it, you could make the argument that mankind was having a measurable impact on global warming. But the problem with anything that you look at, any data, is that there is something else that has an impact on global warming, and that is the sun. The sun has the biggest impact on global warming over anything that mankind has ever done in the history of mankind, and it might be that way forever. And this is provable in so many ways, and we're going to go through them. Number one, there's something called a solar flare. When there is a solar flare, that is a release of heat in the form of a flare that approaches the Earth and warms the Earth for a temporary period of time. And these occur in different measures throughout time. You can look at solar flare activity. I don't know if they can predict a solar flare. I'm not sure. There's something else called sunspot activity. And sunspot activity is when you have a lower temperature at specific spots on the sun. It looks like a black spot, but it's not really black. And it reduces the temperature of the Earth. You have the rotation of the Earth and the tilt of the Earth, which causes our seasons. So the tilt of the Earth causes part of the Earth to be closer to the sun for part of the year. For example, in New York, you have a winter, and it's cold in the winter, and then in the summertime it's warm. It's because of the tilt of the Earth. And then you have the rotation of the Earth. The rotation of the Earth causes what's called a day-night cycle. You have warm temperatures in the afternoon between perhaps 12 and 3 o'clock, and cool temperatures late at night, perhaps between 4 o'clock and 6 o'clock in the morning. If you look at the temperature variance on the day-night cycle, you're going to see the biggest difference in global warming than you will from any man-made activity. It's very simple. You go outside with a thermometer, you measure the temperature. It's hot out in the daytime, it's freezing at night. The day-night cycle changes the temperature on planet Earth. The temperature changes as it goes across the Earth. The distance that you are from the Earth, I don't know if the Earth is moving away from the sun or closer to the sun. I'm going to assume it's moving away from the sun. The sun may be expanding. It's definitely going to expand in the future. I don't know if it's expanding right now. And you have the solar flares, and you have the fact that solar flares work on a cycle. Sunspot activity works on a cycle. There will be years when there's a lot of sunspot activity, which makes it colder, and there will be years when there's less sunspot activity, which makes it hotter, and it's graphed out. And these periods of time go like this. They're going up and down and up and down and up and down. So there is a short cycle, which means for a few years, maybe for 5 or 6 years or 7 years, it's going to go up and down. And the temperature is going to go up and down, or down and up. And then there's a gradual increase and a decrease, which might take over 100 years. And in the time that we've been measuring global temperatures, I don't think we've gone through a complete cycle. So man-made activities cannot compete with the temperature changes by the day-night cycle, by the rotation of the Earth, by the tilt of the Earth, the seasons, the distance of the Earth to the sun, solar flares, or sunspot activity. All of those things have a larger impact on global temperatures than any man-made activity, and probably will continue to do so for many decades and many centuries, and maybe even thousands of years into the future. When people tell you that man-made activities cause global warming, you are not getting the whole story. It's just not true. It has a minor impact on global warming. In addition, animals that might be threatened and plants that might be threatened from global warming will evolve, because it won't be a sudden change. It will be a gradual change. The temperature of the ocean, of the air, of the ground changes every day and through the seasons, and as the water flows and the air flows, and the fish in the sea and the plants and animals live in varying temperatures. There's people who will tell you a 1 degree change will kill all the fish in the sea and all that. There's no threat that man-made activities is going to have an impact on global warming that's going to wipe out species or animals on a global scale or on a scale that's measurable. It's just nonsense. The other issue is when you are in a state like New York, or maybe if you live in Canada, and someone comes up to you and says, I'm worried about global warming, a lot of people in New York are going to tell you they are not worried about global warming because New York is a cold state. I remember some summers, there was a summer where it was warm for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. And the rest of the year I had to wear a jacket. And it gets really effing cold in New York. Negative 40 degrees. The hair would freeze in your nose and in your ears, and your hair would freeze. And you had to be careful touching metal objects. Your hand could freeze. If you grabbed a metal post, your hand could freeze to the post, and you'd have to peel it off, or it could get stuck to it. The deserts are the hottest places on the earth, and we do not have an epidemic of deserts that are too big for us to manage. Deserts are not threatening people's life. We can raise the temperature of the earth and actually it won't harm people. I was in Miami in January, and it was cold outside. I had to wear a jacket, and I was freezing, and I got sick. We can survive global warming to a certain extent. We actually are going to survive global warming. The damage of global warming, to humanity is small. It is not the big threat that you think it is. But I'm going to explain to you why I believe that liberals and Democrats pitch this issue. Why is it that this is a liberal issue? I believe it's a liberal issue because liberals and Democrats are anti-business, and they pin the problem on business. I've already expressed to you that the military is the largest known source of global warming that's been measured in short periods of time due to nuclear bomb testing. But the liberals who are anti-business and the Democrats who are anti-business want you to believe that global warming is a problem so they can regulate businesses, tax businesses, and blame businesses. That's their boogeyman. And Republicans are pro-business. They don't want businesses to be taxed. And the solutions they come up with, like the carbon tax, are failed solutions. A carbon tax does not stop global warming. It makes a company pay more money to pollute, which means it just cuts into their profits, and that's it. They don't stop polluting because of a carbon tax. They just cut into their profits. That's what happens. We do need to limit man's impact on global warming, but I do not believe it's an emergency situation. I do not believe it has to be done overnight. Most of the solutions are good ideas, should be done, are in the process of being done, and we need the technology to do it. For example, solar-powered cars. You know, when I was younger, I was like, why don't we have them? As I studied them and read about them, now I know why we don't have them. There are technical limitations that make it difficult to have a solar-powered car. Everybody's not going to have a solar-powered car. Maybe 1,000 years from now we will. But 20, 30 years from now, there's going to be some people, a portion of the population in the warm South with the bright sun, who might have solar-powered cars that's going to provide a portion of their energy needs. If they do the least amount of driving, it may provide more. If you look at the average driving that a car owner does, a solar-powered car is not really sufficient to handle the average driving that the average driver does in the United States, even in the sunny climates. The technology is not able to do it. Maybe it could accommodate a portion such as half or a third or 25%. Those numbers are actually feasible, but 100% no. 10 to 12 miles, 8 miles, you could get. But people drive more than that in one day. They drive 30 miles a day or more. And that assumes clear weather. And it's got to be year-round. It's not feasible to shut down nuclear power plants. Nuclear power plants are actually pretty safe. If you look at the problems that have actually occurred, it hasn't been the worst thing that's happened in the world. War has caused more devastation. Embargoes have caused more devastation. Nuclear power plant disasters can be devastating, but they're not the most devastating. Water pollution from sunscreen is pretty devastating. And plastics in the ocean, you could argue, is probably a bigger problem than nuclear power plants. Lead in the water is probably a bigger problem. It really does affect a lot of people. Air pollution, smog in LA is a serious problem that really affects a lot of people. Okay, so the other issue, you've got the energy plants, and you've got the other issue is that businesses don't want to pay for technology that is going to cost them money. You won't be able to make them do it. You can't talk them into doing it. You can't tax them into doing it. Those solutions have never worked. The only way you can convince a business to go green is either to give them the money to do it, or for that technology to be profitable to run and profitable to replace existing technology, and it isn't, and it probably never will be. I love E85. I love solar power. I love wind power. I want to see solar-powered cars. I want to see the end of nuclear power plants, but it's not feasible. You know why it's not feasible? Because as soon as you go one day without electricity, you're going to say, you know what? I support nuclear power. That's what's going to happen. People are not going to give up their cars because you don't have an alternative. You're not going to give up your electricity. You're not going to give up your internet. You're not going to give up your gas-powered car. People are not willing to give those up. They're willing to accept a certain level of pollution. I want to get rid of a lot of the pollution. I've been to LA. The smog is embarrassing. And it's a Democrat state. It's a Democratic state that is anti-pollution, but they have the worst, most embarrassing pollution that I have ever seen in my life. They should be ashamed of themselves for all the smog that they have in LA. You can literally see it. It's like a fog that moves through the city and is orange in color. I don't remember if it had an odor to it, but it's weird. And people don't realize this is real. This is a real thing, and it's like once a week you got to deal with the smog. And they haven't made it go away. They're not doing enough. They've done too little to make it go away. Democrats don't have the willpower to solve the smog problem in Los Angeles. Okay, so I think that's enough. And if you have any comments, post below.